We've heard the story of Snow White. We know what happens with the dwarfs and what they do with their, well, this is a story after. Snow White and her prince had recently been married, and they were living happily at the castle. The 7 dwarfs missed Snow White, but she made sure to visit them often. One spring day, Snow White went to the dwarfs' cottage. The dwarfs were not expecting her, but the princess had a very special surprise planned for them. And there's our princess. Hi, Snow White. Snow White knew the dwarfs worked hard. That day, she wanted to make sure when they got home, they didn't have to do any more work. No dusting, no sweeping, and no cooking. Snow White waited until the dwarfs had left. Then she and her animal friends hurried into the cottage. The princess looked around. By the time the dwarfs get home tonight, our surprise will be ready. So here are the dwarfs heading off to work, Snow White waiting for them to leave. So they set to work. Snow White sang a cheerful song as she swept the cottage floor. The birds chirped while they picked up crumbs. The squirrels used their fluffy tails to dust. And the chipmunks and deer washed and dried the breakfast dishes with so many helpers. Snow White had the downstairs gleaming. Next, they went upstairs, and the princess began to make beds. Pull the covers up tight, she told the bunnies. Then fold down the top. Then it's perfect. The bunnies hopped off to start the other beds. So here they are finishing up. I think it's really funny here. The deer's washing the dishes. Okay, and there she's showing them how to make a nice, neat bed and with the bunnies. And this is whose bed? Sneezy's bed. Oh. What are we going to do next? Before long, every inch of the dwarf's cottage was neat and tidy. Snow White and the animals headed outside to gather fresh berries, nuts, and apples to use in the dwarf's supper. They'll be very hungry after their long day, said the princess. Luckily, the blueberry bushes had lots of ripe fruit, and the basket was quickly filled. I know what we'll make for dessert, Snow White told the rabbits. Blueberry pie. Boy. Next, the princess and her friends strolled into a meadow to find some wildflowers. Lovely, said Snow White as she sniffed a blossom. This will be perfect for the table. You think they're using flowers as the tablecloth? I don't think so. And where are the blueberries? The bunnies guarding them. Back inside the cottage, Snow White and her friends got to work fixing supper. There was soup to be simmered, bread to be made, and a pie to be baked. Before she knew it, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the window panes. Tweet, tweet, chirp. A bluebird was singing outside the window. That was the signal to tell Snow White that the dwarfs were almost home. Snow White and the animals hurried outside and hid. She couldn't wait to see what the dwarfs thought of their surprise. She peeked in through the window. When they got inside, the dwarfs stopped and stared. They couldn't believe their eyes. The floors were swept, the room was tidy, and there was even a freshly baked pie cooling on the windowsill. What is that delicious smell? Doc wondered. Look, cried Grumpy. He pointed to the table which had been set. Then he went to the pot of soup. Someone's been in our house. So they're coming home from work, and Look at the surprise on their faces from seeing everything all tidy and smelling good. The dwarfs were confused. They tried to guess which dwarf had done all this. Doc noticed that Happy's smile was especially big. Was he keeping a secret? Dopey pointed out that Sneezy seemed super sneezy, maybe because he had dusted and swept the cottage. Snow White giggled as she listened outside the window. They'll never guess that we did it, she whispered to her animal friends. When the dwarfs started to eat their pie, Snow White quickly headed home. There's old Sneezy and Dopey. Snow White with the animals. Excuse me just a second, the pages are stuck. Whoop. Inside the cottage, Bashful had one more guess. Whoever was behind the surprise would have to be one tired dwarf. The truth was, Sleepy wasn't the only one. After a long work day, their tummies pleasantly full, all 7 dwarfs were ready for bed. They're trying to guess who did all this work. When they climbed the stairs, the dwarfs found one last treat: 7 neatly made beds and 7 perfectly fluffed pillows. As they drifted off to sleep, the dwarfs decided to tell their good friend Snow White about this wonderful surprise the very next time they saw her. There they are off to bed. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the story.